Too much cowbell? Welcome. My name is Dan Martin. I'm the president of the St. Louis Media History Foundation. Bill McClellan said I should start off with a joke, so here's the joke. What's it like working in media in 2025? Well, the pay is crappy, there's horrible hours, and the insane pressure of a deadline is unbearable. On the other hand, everyone hates us. So I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Hendry's, the caterer, Jason here at the Sheldon, Joe Marcolini, who redesigned our website. And if you don't know, we're a 501c3. We've been around about 15 years. Frank Apsher is our executive director and the founder. All our archives, digital archives, thousands of them that get requests from all around the world, are on our website that you have on your programs, stlhistory.org. Our physical archives are with the State Historical Society of Missouri, which is our collections at UMSL, but of course their headquarters is in Columbia with 7 satellite stations. And I want to say thank you to all of you for coming, and I really want to thank the board. Anyone that's a board of directors member here, could you stand up and wave? Give them a round of applause. And I really especially want to thank past President Ken Olemeyer and our Vice President, Jeannie Westmoreland, who's also an inductee tonight. I couldn't have done this without her. And we're trading some interesting conversations this morning. And I want to say this is a sellout tonight. It's the first time we ever had one of those, so thanks for putting up with all this. Okay, I've got some good news and bad news. The bad news is that Carol Daniel has a bum knee and can't be here. That's the bad news. The good news is we have a Hall of Famer replacement for her. And does anyone here not know who Betsy Bruce is? Is Betsy here? There she is. Okay, great. So Betsy, if you don't know, she's been on the air since 1971, KTVI, KMOX, loads and loads of awards for journalism, and one of the nicest people in journalism in St. Louis today. So a big hand for Betsy Bruce, your MC.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's an honor to be here to pinch hit, and I owe this one to the foundation because a few years ago, I was to be the MC, and I came down with COVID. And Frank and a few other people had to fill in, and I know it went well. We're delighted to have everyone here tonight. It's exciting to see a sellout crowd in this lovely old historic building. I want to thank the foundation for all the work that it does for our community. It's precious to be able to save the work that we do. People have given up writing letters. I don't know what historians are going to do down the road, but at least they'll have access to our news stories and our public relations efforts, our advertising, and the community efforts that so many of you have been involved in. I was honored to be a part of the 2008 class and to be recognized with so many talented individuals, some of whom are in the room tonight, I think. And for those of you who are new to this organization, please be sure to visit our website to see the Hall of Fame members who are already part of this group. And I'd like to ask any Hall of Fame members here in the audience to please stand up so we can recognize you. Must be somebody. And a thank you tonight to KMOV for being an event sponsor. And they asked me to say these words for their two inductees. Julius Hunter and Robin Smith are historic St. Louis media figures. They are two of the key pillars in which KMOX and then KMOV built its nationally recognized award-winning journalism reputation. Julius brought honesty, integrity, and fair journalism to the station every day. He was very good at puns, too. Robin was the heart and soul of the nation's connection to the St. Louis community, and very well known, of course. KMOV and Gray Media are honored to have Julius Hunter and Robin Smith represent us in the St. Louis Media Hall of Fame. So let me begin our program tonight with a very familiar name and a dear friend of so many of us. The first honoree in the radio category tonight is Mike Shannon. Of course, we should mention where he went to high school. Anybody know? CBC. And he played 8 years for the St. Louis Cardinals, including the 1964 and 67 championship teams. But most of us, for sure, know him for his radio work, which he began in the broadcast booth at KMOX in 1973, joining Jack Buck for play-by-play coverage of the Cardinals. After Jack's passing, Mike became the Cardinals' beloved lead announcer from 2002 to 2021. Mike also telecast Cardinals and MLB games with fellow inductee Jay Randolph and was a backup analyst behind Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek for NBC's Game of the Week. He's earned an Emmy Award, is a member of the St. Louis and Missouri Sports Halls of Fame. He was even named Missouri Sportscaster of the Year in 2002 and the next year in 2003. Yet none of us could ever forget these immortal words, "Get up, baby, get up, get up." We're proud to present this honor to Mike Shannon, and accepting the award tonight is his brother-in-law, David Bird.
Good evening, distinguished guests. I'm very glad to be here. My sister wrote a supposed quick and easy speech, so as her big brother, I rewrote it. As you know, Mike was a personality of the Cardinals for many, many years. What you didn't know is Mike was a very quiet guy. You had to go seek him out in the room by reading the name tag on his shirt. What you may not have known about Mike is he gave at least 10 local charities a year and never wanted it to be known to the public. He loved his wife, his kids, his grandkids, and his great-grandkids with all his heart. Once he even owned a racehorse. I think it was called Slow Feet. He loved to fish and hunt with his friends and family, loved playing golf with Jay Randolph and Red Shandy's his entire life. Mike served in the Army, was a member of the Elks, and will give his shirt off his back for anyone in his life. Thank you for this honor tonight.
The second honoree is a pair recognized for their pioneering work in print, Joseph Palmer and Betty Lee. They were editors of Proud magazine, which was written and published in the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood. Proud focused on African American issues in the greater St. Louis area. Those two also co-founded the Greater St. Louis Association of Black Journalists, along with other members of that organization, and that was in 1976. A St. Louis native, Palmer dedicated his time to minority-owned businesses and mentoring students and young reporters. Lee taught school in Kirkwood and helped to produce the Proud TV show on KPLR. She also worked as an aide to U.S. Representative William Lacey Clay. These two really were pioneers in our community, and we are proud to welcome Joseph Palmer and Betty Lee to the Hall of Fame this year. Accepting this recognition will be family member Chris Lee and Theda Palmer.
Good evening. In grad school at Howard University, my mom studied under the renowned black historian John Hope Franklin, which ignited her civil rights activism for the rest of her life. I remember Mom as someone who had an amazing command of the English language. She was an excellent writer and editor, but early in her teaching career never envisioned herself becoming a journalist. The civil rights movement of the 1960s changed all that. With summers off from her teaching position at Kirkwood High School, she would travel to the Deep South as a freedom rider and help black Southerners register to vote. Here in St. Louis, she would demonstrate against racial inequity and social justice and was actively engaged in local politics. Towards the end of that decade, she concluded that more needed to be done to provide more in-depth stories about and for our region's African American community, which led Mom and two of her closest friends and associates to create Proud magazine, with her serving as editor. Proud was unlike any local publication at the time. It was beautifully designed and offered readers a wide variety of in-depth and thought-provoking stories about the African American experience. Joseph Palmer, one of tonight's other honorees, would soon join the Proud team. Joe was a civil rights and political activist in his own right. A St. Louis native, he was one of the first black submariners in the U.S. Navy. Upon leaving the service, he settled in New York City and operated his own business before returning to St. Louis in the early 1960s. Now, I'm not sure how Joe and Mom first met. I was away at university, but apparently they hit it off immediately, and eventually they would also establish the Jeff Vanderloo News, a monthly tabloid with stories centered on the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood in North St. Louis that was undergoing major redevelopment at the time. Joe was the publisher of the JVL News and would later assume that role for Proud magazine too, with both publications operating out of the same office on Dr. Martin Luther King Drive. When I returned to St. Louis, Joe actually gave me my first job as managing editor of the Jeff Vanderloo News, which I did for 2 years before taking a PR position at Southwestern Bell. From this partnership, additional opportunities involved, including the Proud TV show that aired on KPLR TV, a documentary film called Phoenix Rising, which received an Emmy Award for telling the story of the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood, and the Jeff Vanderloo Communications Resource Center, which offered media training to area high school students. In 1976, Joe and my mom joined several other local black journalists in founding the Greater St. Louis Association of Black Journalists, a professional membership organization now known as the National Association of Black Journalists St. Louis chapter. I believe that the founding of GSLABJ, now NABJ St. Louis, and the organization's creation of the nation's first minority journalism workshop, an intensive multi-week training program for high school students and first-year college students, to be one of Mom's and Joe's proudest accomplishments. Through that program, Mom and Joe mentored dozens of young, aspiring minority journalists, many of whom would become successful media professionals locally and nationally. A few of them may even be here tonight. It's hard to believe that Mom and Joe have been gone for 30 years and 27 years, respectively. Members of Joe's family who are here in the audience, in addition to Theda, Paulette Washington, his sister, and Maya, his niece, are here if they would like to stand and be recognized. And also Joe's daughter, Jolene, and my mom's granddaughter, my daughter, Lauren, send their love and appreciation from afar. It is extremely gratifying to our families to accept the Hall of Fame awards from the St. Louis Media History Foundation. Thank you so much for honoring their legacy. You want to say anything? Did you want to say anything? Did you want to say anything?
The third honoree tonight, also recognized in the print category, is Myron Holtzman. Myron was the last sports editor of the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. He covered everything, and we mean everything: high school sports, Mizzou football and basketball, Fighting Illini football and basketball, St. Louis Cardinals baseball and football teams, and the St. Louis Steamers. He also has written for Sporting News, AP, and served as the publications manager for the St. Louis Cardinals. He and Greg Marisek were authors of The Cardinals of Cooperstown. He is currently the Public Relations Director for the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, and since you asked, he's a graduate of University City High School. We are thrilled to present this award to Myron Holtzman.
Well, as Betsy said, I get to represent myself tonight. So, and I think she took most of my speech, but that's okay. I'm sure most of you have heard the expression, "I'd rather be lucky than good." Well, I hope I was good enough to earn this entry into the St. Louis Media History Foundation Hall of Fame, for which I am very humble and I'm very proud. But I know I have been very, very lucky in my life and my career. I'm lucky to have a wonderful and supportive family, my wife, Eleanor, who is here tonight, and 3 kids, Laura, Scott, and Brad, and their spouses. And I also have 5 wonderful grandkids. They've been behind me all the way. I only wish my parents and brothers and sisters were here with us today to share with me this honor. But I've also been lucky in other ways. I wasn't even going to college until a friend offered me a last-minute loan to start at the University of Missouri. Then I was going to go into a business school until I realized I couldn't add 2 and 2. That's when I decided to do something for the rest of my life that I'd enjoy. And since I've been a sports enthusiast all my life, I thought sports writing would be the way to go. And there I was at the country's best journalism school to follow that path. Old Mizzou, lucky again. I've had a wonderful career, starting in Rochester, Minnesota, and then getting a call from Bob Burns at the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. I was lucky again to be tutored by Burns, who turned out to be one of my very, very good friends. What a guy he was. Many times Bob and I would talk into the wee hours of the morning, talking sports and what it meant to be a good sports writer and a good citizen. Along the way, I also made great friends at the Globe and the Post-Dispatch, including Dennis Dillon and Dave Lang, Joe Castellano, and George Solak, whose friendships I've continued to hold very close. And that's some 38 years since the Globe ceased its publication, if you can believe it's been 38 years. Incidentally, I was the last sports editor with the Globe when it closed, and many blame me for that fact that it closed. I covered many great events at the Globe, from high school and college teams to the Cardinals, Blues, football Cardinals, including bowl games, World Series, and Stanley Cup games. It was a very, very fun career. Then working for the Sporting News, the Associated Press, Anheuser-Busch, and finally working with the St. Louis Cardinals and their publications. Sometimes it never felt like I was working at all. Now, post-career, I've been lucky to be associated with the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, the St. Louis Baseball Writers' Dinner, not to mention co-authoring the book, like Betsy said, The Cardinals of Cooperstown, which has let me keep my hands in a lot of sports things still going on in the area. I've been fortunate and lucky, if you will, to have been inducted into the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, and the St. Louis Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. So today, as I stand up here to receive this amazing induction into the St. Louis Media History Foundation Hall of Fame, I say thank you. Thank you to my family and the Media History Foundation and everyone who has made me lucky enough to follow a sports writer's dream. Thank you. And thank you.
Our fourth inductee tonight is Julius Hunter, who is being honored for his work in television. His career started over 50 years ago as a reporter for KSDK, and then KSD, and then became a weekend anchor, a weekend news director, and after 5 years there, he left to join KMOX TV, now KMOV TV. And as an anchor of the 6 o'clock news, he became the first African American to anchor a prime-time newscast in the St. Louis market. When he left his successful TV career back in 2002, he went on to other endeavors, writing 7 books, community engagement with St. Louis University, and becoming a member of the St. Louis City Board of Police Commissioners. Another proud accomplishment, he established the Julius K. Hunter and Friends African American Research Collection at the St. Louis County Library, which offers community genealogical resources. And we are happy to induct Julius Hunter into our Hall of Fame.
Thank you, my people. And now, as a follow-up, I'm going to part this room in half so that you can cross in the middle. It is such a joy and an honor to be here tonight to receive this award from the Media History Foundation. It is an organization that we should all support. And I've asked that they take down your names tonight and phone numbers so that I can call you in the morning to have you either establish or renew your membership. And since I'm on the circadian sleep rhythm, your call will come sometime between midnight and 6 tomorrow morning. I cannot tell you, what, as I said, what an honor it is. Know how hard Frank, in particular, Frank Apsher, and others have worked to make this something that we should support, an organization that we should support. A couple of things. I was told that I had 3 minutes, and I told them that I couldn't get up the steps in 3 minutes. And so I might go 30 seconds over that. A couple of things you did not know, and that was not mentioned, that before getting into the media business, did you know that I was housemaster at Washington U of a dormitory of 140 freshman women? That's when I was hired at Channel 5. That's the job they hired me away from. Housemaster of a dormitory of 140 freshman women. And that's when I learned that hell hath no fury like a woman's dorm. Thank you in the back there. I know that table is the Landmarks people. They got here first. They started drinking before everyone else did. Another thing that you might not know that's relative is that when I was first hired at Channel 5 in 1970 as the first African American on St. Louis television, isn't that just sort of ridiculous as we look back on? That was 1970. I mean, there was nobody black on St. Louis television other than Diane White, who was there. But did you know that when I was hired by Channel 5, I was thrown into a tiny little office with Jay Randolph and Ron Jacober. Now, Jay, with his illustrious background, and he's an honoree tonight, Jay, I think, sort of thought that God had blessed him with a little guy that was going to be carrying a lantern with a little cap on. So, the Randolphs of Virginia, you know. And he's the one who started calling me Jules. But I think he was saying jewels. He would sometimes pop into the office there, throw me his keys on the desk, his auto keys, and say, Jules, I was not able to park my car. Would you take my car and move it onto the garage? But, I mean, it got to be fun. And I don't mean to demean a fellow honoree tonight. But there are some other people that I might demean. I don't know. Like, I hope I do demean. I mean, heck, I get a chance to get up here and I have a captive audience. And if you were drinking what I've been drinking all evening, you'll be an easy audience. I heard on the way down here that there's been an effort to get rid of some colors in our food. I would like to suggest orange first to get rid of. Ooh. 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 They're finally coming around. And then there's another thing I want to say. I know, there are a few of you here. You somehow got in, I don't know how. I also wanted to announce something tonight, since I'm sort of rambling here. They told me not to write a formal speech, so you're getting, yeah. I learned the other day that my Tesla, wait a minute. I learned that my Tesla goes both ways, I know that. But I did not know that it now wanted to be a Honda. That's something else I was thinking about. But here's my main point of the day before I get the hook. And Betsy has a very nice hook that's sort of like my hook. I don't know. There has been a declared war on our educational institutions. And I want to say that my two beautiful, educated, brilliant daughters thought I should mention to you tonight the importance of the print and broadcast media and all of our supporters in literature. We should band together to stop this attack on our educational institutions. Go ahead. So my beautiful daughters who could not be here tonight wanted to represent their institution to suggest that it become our banner and our flag for the campaign that we are going to unite together against the attack on our educational institutions. Here it is. And we will carry this banner high. And I want to say that when I went to visit them one time there, both of them Harvard honors graduates, my two daughters, there was, go ahead. Because what you're applauding is 8 years of tuition that I had to pay there, from which I'm still recovering. But when I visited them one time, there was a demonstration on campus against a young man who had put a swastika in his window there on campus so that it was highly visible. And there was one student in particular, a young student, who was waging the attack against that swastika being in a window at Harvard, the 400-year-old Harvard, by the way, against how many presidents have we had? But The student's name was Ketanji Brown. When I was there, you now may know her as Ketanji Brown Jackson. And that was going on when my daughters were at Harvard as undergraduate students. And so, all of us who are members of the media and associates of those who are members of the media, married to those, dating those, throwing those out who are members of the broadcast and the print media, let us not let our institutions, let us not let broadcast, print, journalism, and our other efforts be stymied or attacked. And our banner will be, I'll teach you the Harvard marching band song, because I know it. Da, 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 da. Any other Harvard grads here? This is our banner. Thank you. I have more than used my time, and I just hope that they haven't taken my double Manhattan away at my table. Thank you, and I'll close with this. I want to let you young people in particular, both of you, know that you must remember 3 things about getting old. One thing is that your memory will go. And I can't remember the other 2.
Our 5th inductee tonight is John Carney, being honored for his work in radio. John ignored his father Jack's advice to avoid radio and ended up being on the air for over 40 years. He started in Denver and then returned to native St. Louis in 1986, where he was paired with Mort Crowley and Grant Horton at KXOK. He then could be found up and down the proverbial radio dial at KSD, WIBV, and WEW. He then landed at KMOX, where he stayed for 13 years. You know, he was part of the inaugural KTRS lineup with other Hall of Fame members, Bill Wilkerson and Jim Holder, and he now hosts the noon to 3 p.m. slot on KTRS, paired with another radio legacy, Julie Buck. We are pleased to induct the next member into the Hall of Fame, John Carney. By the way, the Carneys joined the Pulitzers, the Bucks, and the Peter families as the Parent-Child Hall of Fame members.
Didn't Steve Schiff look fantastic? I've seen him in years. Hey, before we start, and Dan, this doesn't count on my time. So 25 years ago, I was in this room. I was playing with a Grateful Dead cover band, and we were playing a Mardi Gras party. And it went really well. They really liked us. But what they didn't tell us when we got here is this is the 5th floor, and the Sheldon, 25 years ago, didn't have an elevator. So all the amps, all the drums, all the mics, all the guitars, up a spiral staircase of 5 sets of steps. And they said, "You guys were great. Come back next year." And we said, "Great, it'll be an extra $7,000. That's why I haven't been in this room for 25 years. So it's good to be back. Good to be back. I never really expected to be immortalized anywhere else other than like 23andMe. So this is pretty cool, I gotta say. And the other people that are in here, just giants in the industry, and I can't help but kind of feel like the other guy in Wham right now, what's his name? Anybody? Okay, that's my point. Jay Randolph, me, seriously? No. Anyway, March 10th, 1984, in the thriving metropolis of Monte Vista, Colorado. Betsy, thanks for Denver, but it was about 200 miles from there and no one spoke English. A young John Francis took to the airwaves there, playing country music on KSLV. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. So 3 months later was the first anniversary of me getting fired from my first radio job. And I assumed it's because I was a Jew from the city playing country music, but it turns out that I just sucked at what I did. So it was really more of the problem. So I knocked around music radio for a while, but it wasn't really until I started doing talk in '85 that I found my voice in this business, literally. People just assume, this is going to drive me crazy. Can you? I think that's Julius's vodka. People just assume that I learned radio from my pop, who also resides in this hall, which makes me especially proud. But that wasn't the case, because along with discouraging me, which Betsy mentioned, he also passed away 3 months after I started doing radio. So it's been a while. I'm good. He didn't teach me how to live on $140 a week. I picked that up much later, and I was blessed going to KXOK in 1985, 1986, to produce and co-host with Mort Crowley, and then with Grant Horton, both of them in the Hall of Fame here. At KMOX, where I spent 13 years, 7 of those years I worked following the late Jim White. I worked alongside the late Jack Buck. And you really get a good sense of your age when everybody you refer to that you worked with, you refer to as the late. I'm glad I'm not the late. So, I tried. I knew I had to develop some kind of style to separate myself from the white noise, and smart, educated, well-read, pretty much all taken already by other hosts. So I went with smarmy, sarcastic, and narcissistic, self-deprecating humor, and, you know, it worked. I'm here, and you're in a chair, so don't judge at all. It's weird to talk this long, honestly, and not do a live commercial. I feel guilty, Mr. Dorsey, that I'm not doing a spot for Allen Roofing right now. And usually when I'm up at a podium like this, I'm 75826 for the trip to Vegas. Anyone? Check your tickets. And we're going to auction off this puppy next. That's most of what I've done up here. So to be up here accepting an award is really good. I highly recommend it if you get the chance. But the reason I'm up here really has less to do with putting on a radio show and more about the stories and the organizations that we've had an opportunity to highlight over the years that deserve it. And it's what really that led me to start the Carney's Kids Foundation, of which some of them are here. Hi, board. Yeah, they do great work. Granite remnant sale this weekend at Hallmark Stone, if you're looking. And it seems to me that since I've been given this gift to talk for a living, I really have a duty to give back something helpful. And to date, the foundation has raised over $1 million for kids' charities in St. Louis. It's sad that my most successful endeavor doesn't pay me anything, but back to radio really quick. I'm still going to be shorter than Julius. Nothing has brought me more satisfaction than when people will come up to me and say, you know what, I was a big fan of your father. I loved his show. It was a household tradition to listen to the Saturday morning comedy show, and I enjoy your program as well. But for some reason, it's the people, and this doesn't happen as much anymore, it's the people that would come up to you and say, You know, you're just riding on your father's coattails, or Bob Hyland would be spinning in his grave, or those were quotes. Those were really quotes. It was those comments really that drove me to continue to do this. I was driven by spite. Not proud of that. It is what it is. And I desperately wanted to escape the shadows. Not to say I'm not incredibly proud of what my father was able to achieve in this business, and that I inherited his ability to communicate, except with my children, which are right there. Stand up so people can hide their stuff. They're my boys. Come on, get up, just real quick. Let's get it done. Yeah, that's how they make teenagers now. Gigantic. My daughter Jordan, my sister, my in-laws. Guys, thank you so much for being here. But I stuck with this and found my own way. So to set an example for them is what drives me now, more than spite, for sure. So I share this with all the people who had faith in me, radio people like my KTRS family of 10 years, advertisers, friends, so many who have showed up tonight. I appreciate that. The family that you met, and of course my wife, who I hadn't mentioned yet, so that was a good save by me. And I think if my wife had to hear one more time somebody say, "Oh, you must just laugh all the time," she'll kick you in the throat. I'm not kidding. I continue to be driven by my desire to make all of you proud of what I do, and I won't stop tonight. Thanks so much. This means the world.
Our new 6th Hall of Fame member tonight is the late Irv Hammerman for his work in PR and advertising. He was partners with other Hall of Fame members, Sid Savin and Harry Gibbs, at a small St. Louis agency. They developed the idea of 4,000 mailboxes becoming branch offices for Community Federal Savings and Loan. Anybody remember the jingle? Chapman's Ice Cream was known for its, quote, subtle little difference. Their agency changed partners, names, and clients over the years until Irv retired at the age of 80. And I'm personally happy for the Hall of Fame to recognize Irv Hammerman for his work in the St. Louis PR and advertising. Accepting the honor tonight is his son, Dr. Harley Hammerman.
So how did I get the slot following Julius Hunter and John Carney? Here goes. So my father died in 2018 at the age of 97. A lot of you probably never knew him. What sort of a guy was my dad? He was the guy I spent my whole life emulating. My parents were married in 1948. They had 4 children. I'm the oldest. My dad spent his life providing for his family. His parents were first-generation immigrants and led a relatively Spartan life. He wanted more for us. In 1947, shortly before my parents were married, my dad opened a small appliance store at the corner of Grand and Park Avenues, which he aptly called Grand Park Appliance. Soon my dad began selling furniture in addition to appliances. He moved the business to a larger building at the corner of Grand and Choteau. Successful there, he opened 2 more Grand Park locations, one in Overland and one in Maplewood. But my dad was just getting started. In 1957, he opened a small advertising agency with Sid Savin and Harry Gibbs. You remember Harry, he was Texas Bruce. Their first office was on Hampton Avenue, and their first big client was Community Federal Savings and Loan. At this point, between the advertising agency and his 3 furniture and appliance stores, my dad was working Monday through Friday, all day Saturday, and at least 3 evenings a week until 9 o'clock. But it wasn't just his work ethic that stood out, it was also his work ethics. My dad was the most honest and ethical man I've ever known, and he wouldn't work alongside or do business with anyone who wasn't. He treated his employees as if they were family, and they loved and respected him for that. Eventually, my dad sold Grand Park to concentrate on his advertising agency. The agency moved from Hampton to an office in Clayton, and then to a new building on Warson Road. And as the agency grew, so did their reputation for creativity. So as you heard, St. Louis's 4,000 mailboxes became Community Federal's branch offices. And I could sing the jingle, but I better not. Chapman's Ice Cream became known for its subtle little difference. I think that was Jack Murdoch. And then there were the self-deprecating Van Dyke beer commercials. People always laugh when I order Van Dyke beer, one quipped. The campaign gained national recognition and was so successful it put the small St. Louis brewery out of business. They couldn't keep up with the demand. Over the years, the advertising agency had an ever-changing cast of partners, various names, and various clients. But my father was constant until the day he retired at the age of 80. But there's one more chapter to my father's story. During World War II, he was an assassin. Because he was small and unassuming, because he was an accomplished gymnast, because he was fluent in French and German, and because he was Jewish, my dad was handpicked by the U.S. High Command to parachute behind enemy lines and eliminate strategic targets, including German SS and Gestapo officers. He totaled 14 dangerous missions, and it's amazing that he survived. He kept all of this from us, his family, for a long time. He had sworn not to disclose his clandestine activities for 35 years. And after that, he was embarrassed to do so. But we eventually found out and teased out the details. My dad found it easier to write about his war experiences than to talk about them. He wrote a book he called Codename Hammer. His memoir is published online at codenamehammer.com. It's a must-read. The night my father died, I stayed up reading his book for the umpteenth time. On the last page, he wrote, "I want all of you to know the reason I found it difficult to relate the details of these missions to you is that this is certainly not the way I want anyone to remember me. I just want to be remembered as a good person, and most of all, a peace-loving one, who very much loved his wife, his children, and his grandchildren. I sincerely hope I have shown my love to all of you in such a way that this is indeed the way you will remember me." I know my dad would have been honored and humbled to be inducted into the St. Louis Media History Hall of Fame. Thank you.
The next honoree into the Hall of Fame is the late Don Johnson in the television category. He was another pioneer in his early broadcasting career as the first full-time African-American reporter on WIL AM in the early 1970s. He left in 1978 to join Fox 2, where he was known for his detailed coverage of City Hall affairs. He was promoted to anchor at KTBI Fox 2 for several years, and that is where I was honored to share a co-anchor seat with him at times and some public affairs shows, and he was a dear, dear friend. Throughout St. Louis, people recognized his voice and his stature, and he was a very proud veteran, I must add. Later, he served in communications at the Missouri History Museum. We are pleased to induct Don Johnson into the Hall of Fame in the television category. Accepting for him will be his daughter, Lauren Johnson Morton.
Good evening, everyone. I am incredibly moved to accept this honor on behalf of my father, Don Johnson. I first want to extend my deepest thanks to the St. Louis Media History Foundation for this tremendous honor. And it is just as much of a true gift to see my father's name among his colleagues, friends, mentors, folks who have known him since forever. Since, as his friend Julius Hunter once said, since he spelled his name with only one N, if you knew my dad, you knew that he loved St. Louis deeply. I moved away for many years, and like many St. Louisans, I had the tendency to turn my nose up at my hometown. The usual litany of gripes, some valid, some less so. But my dad never slighted St. Louis. Instead, he would gently chide me, saying, I agree with you. It's not perfect, but it's home, and you never give up on your home. Whether he was anchoring the news, reporting on stories all over the St. Louis area, emceeing an event, or teaching us about the history of our city and all of its layered complexity, his love for St. Louis never wavered. Ultimately, he saw his work as his way of giving back to the city that had given him so much. Thank you for recognizing the value and the impact of his hopeful vision and his ability to highlight the best of us and the best of our city. On behalf of our family and his friends who are here tonight, thank you for seeing him, thank you for honoring him, and thank you for remembering him. He would have been so proud to have been among you, and we are endlessly proud of him. Thank you.
Tonight, we also honor Harper Barnes, who is being recognized in the print category. He spent over 25 years at the Post-Dispatch as a reporter, editor, and critic. And he also wrote for, are you ready for this list? The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Atlantic Monthly, Village Voice, and Rolling Stone. He became the editor of St. Louis Magazine after leaving the Post, and somehow he also found time to write several books, including Never Been a Time, the 1917 race riot that sparked the civil rights movement. That book is considered to be the historical record of the East St. Louis riots in 1917. And we're delighted to welcome Harper Barnes into the Hall of Fame for his work in the print category.
AV, are we good? Okay, Harper?
Yeah.
I worked with you for a long time. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure, Dan. The best newspaper clipping I ever read was a story about the family that lived at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It was written by Bill McClellan. The best, without, the best, where do I go?
You're here. The best newspaper column, I think.
The best newspaper, why don't you read it? This is my wife, Roseanne Weiss.
All right, I'm going to do this just because you asked. The best column I ever read in a newspaper was by my friend and hiree, Bill McClellan, about a family who lived at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. The best newspaper column I think I ever wrote was in 1988 about a horrible summer-long drought in St. Louis. In it, I tried to conjure up a storm with the magic of music by Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, Bessie Smith, Jimmy Witherspoon, and Gerard Manley Hopkins. Apparently, I was successful. The last line of that column was, quote, I drove to work in a steady downpour. I have always been grateful for the gift of that work. At 87, I have had a long career as a print journalist and a newspaperman and an editor and a novelist. And I thank you all for recognizing me for that work this evening. I want to particularly thank my spouse. Okay, he's thanking me. We've been married for 39 years, so he's thanking me for all she's done for me. Thank you all very much. And I'm just going to add that Harper has been very lucky to be part of this community of artists and writers and editors. And he found his group, he found his people. And so I am very grateful that you are honoring the person that I love the most with your love. Thank you.
Roll over this way.
The next inductee tonight is St. Louis native Wendy Weiss, recognized for her work in radio. Now, she started at the tender age of 24 on air at KMOX Radio on Total Information AM, where she certainly held her own. She later moved to KTRS and worked with Jennifer Bloom on the Jennifer and Wendy Show. And she's been a Donnybrook panelist since 2003. She and her longtime radio partner, the late Hall of Famer Bill Wilkerson, were honored as Media Persons of the Year by the St. Louis Press Club in 1999. And she's, of course, a member of the Missouri Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame. Tonight, we're happy to welcome Wendy Weiss to the stage to accept her award.
Thank you so much. It is a privilege to be here and to follow somebody like Harper Barnes. When you receive that phone call that you are going into the Hall of Fame, then you get the obligatory follow-up calls from friends who are teasing you. You know, what are you going to do? Are you going to sign HOF after all of your, your checks? And that first inquiry came from my former boss, Mark Dorsey, who is also here, whose reputation has already been besmirched tonight by John Carney, so it's fine. But he goes, what's next? He said, Cooperstown? I said, I really don't think so, Mark. I said, don't think so. But he said, are you going to write HOF? I said, no, we've already had them printed on the checks, so I won't have to go to the trouble. I did some background and research, and because I was so overwhelmed by this honor, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't go overtime, and I wanted to make sure that I followed Dan Martin's instructions, and so I watched quite a few of the acceptance speeches, and I was so inspired by Harry Levins, who literally walked to the microphone and said, thank you, and walked off. So inspired that I actually have made, I've made a fairly brief little speech, but I do want you all to know that this great honor will not change me. In any way. Please don't take my picture. The Hall of Fame is a very special bookend to this 41-year career in radio, something I loved so very much. I've come up with a little ditty, not a gritty ditty or a pretty flitty ditty. I hope you will find it mildly amusing and maybe a little witty. St. Louis Media History Foundation, tonight's honor I could not have dreamed in my wildest imagination. On behalf of our family and friends, thank you for going to such lengths with a lovely spread from Andres, and of course for Julius Hunter, plenty of adult drinks. From KMOX to KTRS to 9 PBS, I've been blessed to have worked with the absolute best. Things are changing fast, so many challenges, and it's difficult to know what's ahead. Most of us are traditional media dinosaurs, and today's free-for-all on the socials actually fills us with confusion and maybe even a little dread. But for tonight, let's celebrate each other and the solid work of the past, and hope with a mighty hope that the future will again be rebuilt upon that sturdy base to last. In the meantime, my fellow media members, being here with you all is pure heaven. But please promise you won't be watching the Blues tomorrow night. You'll be watching Donnybrook on 9 PBS at 7. Now, as directed by Dan Martin, in the words of FDR, oft repeated, be sincere, be brief, and finally, be seated. To my husband, Chris, and our children, Kate, Maggie and her husband, Jake, and our grandchildren, Henry, Josephine, and Charlotte, I love you with all of my heart. To our sweet friends, the Marinos, the Dorseys, the Rosenblums, and of course, Greg Kornfeld, who are with us tonight, we cherish your friendship. If you'll permit me, like all of you, I'm remembering and missing absent friends and colleagues who became friends, like so many of you, including Don Johnson, and then beloved family. Joan Boykman and Jeanette Greider are in my heart tonight. And most of all, to my little brother, Woody, who was the beginning of my broadcasting career. I don't think he ever finished a sentence without me interrupting him. A tradition that continues tomorrow night at 7 on 9 PBS. Thank you so much. This means the world to my family and to me.
The next inductee is the late George Johnson for his accomplishments in public relations and advertising. He's best known as the editor of a national newsletter about advertising agency management. It was known as the Yellow Sheet. His advertising career started in the 1950s, and he opened his own shop, George Johnson Advertising, in 1964, where he developed work for many local clients. But for advertising professionals around the country, it was George Johnson they relied upon for his sage wisdom and advice. We're thrilled to welcome George Johnson into the Hall of Fame in the PR and advertising category. Dave Buchholz will accept this honor on George's behalf.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to, on behalf of all of us who knew George, that he's being recognized and honored in this way tonight. A little word about the wardrobe that I have on, and my friend and colleague Jeff Bibb, who's with me here tonight. George typically led his seminars nattily attired in white linen slacks and an abusively loud tropical shirt. So we wear these in his honor tonight. I cannot speak in great detail about George's long career in advertising in St. Louis. All I really know that he used a fictional client, Dr. Schmiercase's Primal Scream Therapy Clinic, as a case study when he shared his agency management wisdom with me and my fellow George disciples. I can speak to his impact and influence on agency owners across North America through his Yellow Sheet agency management newsletter and his agency interchange seminars. I attended my first Yellow Sheet seminar about 2 years into my business. I ran a small agency in Nebraska, and I made it a point to attend at least one each year, not only because of George's sage advice, but because I learned so much from the other agency owners, many of whom have become fast friends. In fact, 12 agency interchange alumni of George's have continued to gather at various locations every 1 to 2 years to honor the memory of their cantankerous, opinionated, and eccentric ad agency guru. We refer to these gatherings as By George seminars. I'd like to share some brief comments of the impact that George had on these agency owners from Carol Russell in Minneapolis. George was a one-of-a-kind and true mentor, and his impact on our business was immeasurable. Early on, there was a year that we received an email inviting us to his next session. We were struggling and could not afford to go, so we declined. He immediately called, said that was entirely unacceptable, and that we must come at no cost. We did, and what we learned saved our business. Some people create agencies to make money, some to change lives. I don't know if he made any money, but I do know he changed our lives. And from Carol's partner, Brian Herder, George Johnson was a walking university, a curmudgeonly compendium of expertise, experience, and information. He saved us from ourselves with alarming regularity. To this day, his maxims direct my thinking, telling me that, quote, "The truth is the truth whether you speak it or not. Satisfied people accomplish nothing, or act as if you are already the person you want to become, or the problem properly stated reveals the solution." Brian says we still keep photos of George around the office just so our young people will ask who he is, and then we get to tell them. Shirley Epps from Avalon, New Jersey. I still see him hitching up his linen pants in a warm resort somewhere as he would describe every client or employee I've ever had and why I should get rid of them. He was funny, sweet, and brilliant, and always right. Brian and Janine Meisner from Canada. One of our favorite lines from George was, "Paper remembers, people forget." Good note-taking helped us on many occasions, as some clients would conveniently develop amnesia when the invoices arrived. And from my friend and colleague Jeff Bibb from Clarksville, Tennessee, among the most notable gifts that George Johnson possessed was this uncanny sixth sense. There were occasions, and I am a participant in one of these, when some of us would receive just an out-of-the-blue phone call from George. He was usually sensing that something might be awry at our firm, or perhaps we were tussling with a tough personal issue, and it was just uncanny that he would call. For my part, many of George's mantras have become common parlance in my agency, and in some cases continue to guide me. He provided counsel when it came to dealing with employee behavior. He would say, "Are you their father? Did you make them behave the way they did? Then what's the problem?" And then the coup de grace was, "And who's the idiot that hired them?" Another Georgism, change is painful. People change only when the pain of not changing exceeds the pain of changing. And here's another. If I tell you before the fact, it's prognosis. If I tell you after, it's an alibi. But perhaps my favorite, and I'm almost done here, my favorite concerns the dilemma of deciding between two courses of action when both appear to be viable. George's advice was, just make a decision and then do everything in your power to make it the right one. Wow. I can truly say that my small Nebraska agency would not have survived, let alone thrived, and we thrived, without knowing, learning from, and frequently being berated by the inimitable George Johnson. He was definitely one of a kind. His impact lives on, even though he left us nearly 30 years ago. As you can tell, we are still feeling his impact. And in spite of the fact that George dismissed Addie Awards and other accolades as quote-unquote beauty contests, I'm pleased, proud, and humbled to accept this well-deserved honor on his behalf, my good friend and mentor, George Johnson. Thanks, George.
Well, we now honor Condé Nast, who was a true magazine publishing pioneer into the Hall of Fame in the print category. His mother was from the prominent St. Louis Benoit family, and he spent his childhood in St. Louis. He earned a law degree from Washington University in 1897. And here's a few words from Susan Ronald, Condé Nast's biographer from England. Sorry, I can't do the British accent, even though there was an article about it this weekend in the Post-Dispatch. But she wrote this. At Vogue, Vanity Fair, and his other magazines, Condé Nast hired the best people he could find for the job without any prejudice to race, color, or creed. Alongside his friend and everyone's favorite raconteur, Frank Crowninshield, Condé discovered New York wit Dorothy Parker. Robert Sherwood, winner of 3 Pulitzers, FDR's speechwriter, and the man in charge of World War II radio propaganda. Also, British actor, author Noel Coward, photographer Cecil Beaton, writer, Congresswoman, and Ambassador Claire Booth Luce. He promoted friendships with singer and actor Paul Robeson and boxer Jack Dempsey. He shook up high society with his Cafe Society, giving elbow room to a place where Mrs. Astor would happily dance with Groucho Marx. Few people had Condé's foresight, wisdom, and courage to make America a better place to live, and even fewer had his good grace, sense of humor, and innate goodness. On behalf of the Nast family, thank you. So we'll learn something new tonight, that Condé Nast came from St. Louis. An inductee tonight for print, Ellen Sherberg served for decades as an award-winning reporter, managing editor, and then publisher of the St. Louis Business Journal. Before that, she was a reporter at KMOX AM and the St. Louis Globe-Democrat. Now, we were friends, bonding over being pregnant in male-dominated newsrooms at the time. We even put together a book on St. Louis resources and activities for parents with young children, but we never managed to find a publisher, did we? Well, Ellen has had great success in her own publishing with articles printed in Time, Newsweek, 17, among many others, and we're so happy to welcome Ellen Sherberg to the St. Louis Media Hall of Fame. I think we can see each other.
This is my personal Media Hall of Fame, and it starts with Table 8, who are my colleagues and friends from the St. Louis Business Journal. Thank you for everything. There are 3 people especially I wish were at that table, and I want to remember them tonight, and I really want to suggest them as nominees for the Hall of Fame. And so I want to remember Steve Trankman, who was our friend, my buddy at KMOX, before he went to work with Betsy at Channel 4. I want to remember Mark McDonough, who was the ultimate news hound, again, working with me at KMOX and then the Business Journal before he was tragically killed in a helicopter accident covering a strike for ABC. And finally, I think it's really important to remember Rick Deloge from the Business Journal, who was the single best-sourced reporter ever, and I think deserves to be lauded. I also want to acknowledge and thank my fellow award winners. I especially am grateful to Harper, who, along with his buddy, John McGuire, and before him, writers like Dixon Terry, just set the bar for what great newspaper writing could be and should be, and made me want to be almost as good as they were. Clearly, without Mark Vittert, I wouldn't be standing here. Mark told somebody once that whatever Ellen did, ask for more, because she could do more. And he taught me how to push myself and really gave me opportunities that nobody else would have. I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of those opportunities without the incredible guidance and counsel of Al Fleischman. So there aren't enough hours in the day for me to tell you all that I learned from both of them. And finally, without Ray Shaw, who was the chairman of ACBJ, American City Business Journals, and Whitshaw, who's the current CEO of the company. They just, they forgave me my mistakes, and there were so many to forgive. In fact, I can honestly say that my career began with a huge mistake, but for Sally Bixby Defty, who was the first woman at the Post-Dispatch to make the newsroom, I wouldn't be here. I was a young reporter, not a young reporter. I was in J school and visited the Post-Dispatch on Christmas break. When I returned to New York, I sent a thank you note. I sent it to Everett Scram and managed to misspell his first and his last name. And Sally graciously sent me a note explaining that, and explaining that they thought I had such promise. Perhaps I could learn from my mistake. So people have described me, there are a lot of words that they use to describe me. Nobody has ever used the word easy. And living with me is really not always easy. There aren't a lot of people you know, I think, who have not one, not two, but 3 boots on their car at different times in their professional life. And so as we were driving here tonight, there was a vehicle that belongs to the city traffic division. And Jerry said, "Oh, look, there's one of your friends." So it reminded me how very lucky I am to have a friend, my best friend, who puts up with me, who doesn't yell a whole lot when I get those boots. And I wish for each of you the same kind of great friend to travel with you through your lives. Thank you. Betsy, thank you.
Ginny Westmoreland is another St. Louis native who's being recognized for her work in PR and advertising. And since you asked, she's a Webster High School graduate. She, in fact, started her career at the Webster Kirkwood Times, which I'm thankful is still being published, by the way. Then worked for several advertising agencies downtown, DMB&B, Gardner Advertising, and TBWA, where she worked on several high-profile national accounts. She then spent 30 fun years at the St. Louis Zoo as marketing director, winning many awards for her creative work. And we're happy to induct Ginny Westmoreland into the St. Louis Media Hall of Fame.
For those of you who asked, I was nominated before I joined the board. I just want you to know that. I just can't believe that I'm part of the same class that includes these well-known people like Jay Randolph, Mike Shannon, Mike Bush, and Julius Hunter. And as my husband told me last week, nobody else can believe it either. So I must say that I'm here representing people who are far less well-known, but just as important, because we're the people who create the damn work that pay the damn bills at the radio and TV stations that allow the world to get to know these really famous people like Jay Randolph, Mike Shannon, Mike Bush, and Julius Hunter. Let's applaud the advertising profession of the world. For those of you who have worked in advertising, you all know it's easy to do lousy advertising. Tom Townsend, another Hall of Fame member, taught me years ago when I worked with him at Darcy that advertising is an art form. Treat it as such. And that's what I've always tried to do. And at the zoo, we had artistic support from a great agency, Advertising Savants, and its leader, Kevin Reardon, and they made the St. Louis Zoo ad work such well-crafted art. Thanks also to the zoo staff, like Greg Linton, some other ones who are here tonight, to zoo leadership for allowing the zoo to do such crazy, provocative TV spots and billboards, reminding people that the zoo is such a special, fun place to visit. And I'm telling you, it was also a special, fun place to work. And my 30 years there were wonderful. Finally, thanks to my husband, Jim Dryden, and my children, Jack and Abby, for allowing those long hours away from home from time to time. And I worked with many talented people at Darcy and Gardner. It was very rewarding and very challenging. And so was handling the advertising and marketing for the St. Louis Zoo. The difference was that when I was working at the agencies and the pressure got too much, I was just stuck. But when the deadlines approached and pressures were at the zoo, I could walk out of my office and be at the zoo. Talk about a perk. Thanks again, thanks to the foundation, and thanks for all of you for coming to support the work we do tonight. I really am humbled. Thank you.
Our next inductee is Robin Smith, and talk about a St. Louis lady. She is a graduate of Northwest High School, Lindenwood University, and St. Louis University. Robin's journalism career spanned from 1974 to 2015. She reported for KTVI and KSDK-TV, but is best known to St. Louisans for her years anchoring and reporting at KMOV-TV. Smith won 4 Emmy Awards, including Best News Anchor. She's also received an Edward R. Murrow Award for Excellence in Journalism. Robin is a founding member of the St. Louis Association of Black Journalists. We're proud to welcome Robin Smith into the Hall of Fame. She was not able to attend tonight, but she asked Steve Perrin to read her remarks.
Thank you. She asked me to do this because I was her producer for 30 or 40 years. Felt like 100? No, I know, Robin, I'm kidding. So, hey, by the way, thank you, Betsy, for pitching in. Doing a great job, really. And I just realized I'm sitting at table 17 with the Hammermans. Great speech, by the way. I think we're the only table with 2 speakers. I think that merits a free round of drinks. Okay. So this is kind of a little weird because, I was Robin's show producer, and as Julius knows, I was his producer a long time, as Mike Bush would know, Corey, Russell, the relationship between show producer and anchor can be complicated. But ours was good. Robin, our relationship was good most of the time. So here we go. Hey, we're almost at the end here. We're at the bottom here. All right, it is worth noting that for almost 40 years, I wrote the scripts for Robin. Tonight, Robin has written the script for me. She wrote that. In accepting this award, she has asked me to read the following. My husband, Isaac Bud Stallworth, University of Kansas Hall of Fame member, basketball, and NBA player, retired, and I are saddened that we could not be with you this evening. I am humbled and honored and would like to express my gratitude to the board. No one reaches this level of recognition alone. I stand on the shoulders of many African American icons who came before me and were my mentors, some of the most important being my parents, Wayman and Edith Smith. My father was the first person of color in Missouri history to become a CPA, first. He taught me that all things are possible regardless of race. My mother was the first Black Phi Beta Kappa in journalism west of the Rocky Mountains at USC. She gave me my love of journalism. My brothers, the late Wayman and Christopher Smith, were prominent St. Louis attorneys. Christopher guided me into my internship at KMOX-TV, where he was working at that time. Thanks in large part to them, I became at age 19 the youngest on-air personality in St. Louis. And I want to add a personal aside here. This was at a time when kids just didn't get jobs at major market television stations. Betsy started at 21. She was also exceptional. She wants to thank, I want to thank, I went back and forth, third person, first person. I'm just going to read it the way she wrote it. I want to thank the late Fred Porterfield, the first African-American television news anchor in St. Louis. Fred taught me that I too could be a television news anchor. By the way, Fred is in our hall. The late Diane White, another member of our hall, who taught me the ropes when it came to the inner workings of a television station. She was America's first black TV weather person, the first one in the country. I must mention the late Michelle Clark, the first black woman to become a national network correspondent for CBS. I watched her while I was a student at Lindenwood University. She was a huge inspiration. While at Lindenwood, I interned at KMOX TV news director Ron Nichols. Did you know him, Julius? I did not. News director Ron Nichols was a very important mentor to me. Before graduating, I got my first TV job at KSD, thanks in large part to the late Howard B. Woods, who hired me. This is worth noting. While working full-time in television, I completed 4 degrees, 2 early on at Lindenwood, then later in my career, 2 masters at SLU. Another personal aside, Robin was driven. A big thank you, she says, goes to my friend who I call my brother, Julius Hunter. Julius was instrumental in getting me to move from KTVI over to KMOX. So Julius, you're to blame. I'd like to acknowledge the late great entertainer, Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy taught me how to ad-lib for 19 hours straight while working with him on his Variety Club telethons. Remember telethons? Remember those? Mike Bush, I know you remember them well. If I can add another personal aside here, she didn't write this. Sammy Davis Jr. is one of only 2 entertainers or celebrities in my over 40-year career who, after appearing on a live program, took the time to walk out of the studio, come back and find the control room and thank the control room crew. Sammy Davis Jr. and Bill Withers of Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone fame. And as you can see, I have never, ever forgotten that. After 42 years, I retired from television news in 2015. The day after I retired, I announced that I would run for Missouri Secretary of State. Boy, did we remember that day in the newsroom. Upon winning the Democratic nomination, I became the first black woman to appear on a statewide ballot as another party nominee. You notice there's a theme. First, 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 first. I think it's interesting that we all still live in a time when we can be with people who were the first. In a while, that will no longer be the case. Just like in a while, there will be no more World War II veterans. So it's kind of special. In closing, my list of mentors could go on and on. I challenge each of you to become a mentor. Share your expertise, knowledge, and experience with someone who needs it. And above all, mentor someone who does not look like you. Another personal aside, Robin taught me a lot about that. Go outside your comfort zone. Contribute to the professional success of someone who is different from you. Pave the way for someone else to be successful, who has a background that is not similar to yours. Let someone stand on your shoulders, and maybe, just maybe, one day they too will also stand up and say, thank you. Thanks.
We now recognize Jay Randolph for his work in television. The West Virginia native had quite a sportscasting career, as everybody in this room knows. The St. Louis Cardinals football and baseball telecasts of national PGA, LPGA, and senior PGA. He even covered 3 Olympic Games and spent 22 years announcing Big 8 basketball. He's a member of the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, and the KSDK Hall of Fame. We're proud to also induct Jay Randolph into the Media Hall of Fame. Now, Jay cannot be here tonight, and he has asked me to read his remarks. He wrote, I've spent the better part of the last 60 years in St. Louis. I drove into town with my wonderful wife, Sue, in late May of 1966. Jack Buck was instrumental in getting me a job at KMOX Radio. We met so many wonderful and giving people there. After 24 months at KMOX, then Channel 5 came calling. Most of my broadcasting was on radio until that point. I had done some TV, baseball, and golf, but Harold Grams, vice president of Pulitzer Publishing, had seen me on a blues hockey telecast, and he felt that I could adapt to TV sports. So they offered me the sports directorship. I wasn't sure how I would do, but as it turned out well because I had some marvelous people helping me along the way. Mr. Grams had recommended me to NBC for network telecasts, and I broadcasted football games and Big 8 basketball for 19 years with All-American Gary Thompson at my side. NBC kept increasing my work duties. It's hard to believe, but I have done over 4,000 live broadcasts. Ray Karpowitz and Bill Bolster and others, and they were GMs at Channel 5, allowed me to step away whenever a network assignment came. I have so many marvelous memories of doing football, basketball, baseball, bowling, golf, and the Olympics. I also did 10 consecutive Orange Bowls. It was all made possible by having Ron Jacober work with me for 13 years. Ron's brilliance was something that I cherish to this day, also thanks to my wonderful friend and sports producer, Andy Moeller. I shall never forget the Seoul Korea Olympics and the great joy I had watching Jackie Joyner-Kersee with her marvelous performance. She has been a part of the sports fabric of this area, and she will always be remembered for her good works. I have to mention Mike Shannon, who also enters the Hall of Fame tonight. He was my best buddy, golfing partner, TV partner, and one of the most interesting people I have ever known. I've worked with over 100 analysts over the years, including Bob Greasy, Johnny Bench, Billy Packer, and many, many more. My golf friendship with Arnold Palmer would rank as one of my top. 1968 Masters champion Bob Golby, he worked with me 13 years on NBC Golf. Lee Trevino was a special friend, as well as Dinah Shore, Bob Hope, Gene Autry, and so many famous people who treated me so very well. I want to congratulate fellow Hall of Famer Mike Bush, who came to Channel 5 at a time that I was phasing out because of my network assignments. He started as a sportscaster and now is the #1 news anchor. Mike has become a St. Louis icon, and it is an honor to receive this induction, and I congratulate all the other inductees. I'm grateful that I am able to spend so much of my life in the best sports town in America. And I will end with Mike's famous words, and there you have it. So, perhaps we've saved the best for last. Tonight we will honor Mike Bush for his work in television. Mike hails from the Windy City and worked for several stations before joining KSDK in 1985. He started as a sports reporter and anchor before transferring to the news side in 2002. He has received many, many accolades during his 40-year career, including 18 Edward R. Murrow Regional Awards, 1 National Edward R. Murrow Award, and honors from the Missouri Broadcasters Association and the Associated Press. And we're just happy to welcome him into our home each night with the news. We're thrilled to welcome Mike Bush into the Media Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much. I cannot believe I'm on the same list as these legends and the legends who have come before. Unlike most of the people who are going in tonight, this is my only Hall of Fame, so it is truly an honor. It is a strange thing to get older and to look in the mirror every morning and expect to see the 35-year-old you, and you see your father in the mirror. I don't know when this happened. I was talking to Frank Absher not that long ago. We're talking about the first newscast in St. Louis that was on nightly, It was anchored by a man named John Rodell. And I worked with John Rodell when I first got to Channel 5. And now I'm working with reporters whose parents aren't as old as I am. So it's just a strange place to be. But it really is an honor to be here tonight. And I'm just the luckiest guy in the world. I just always wanted to be a broadcaster. I used to turn down the sound of Cubs games in Chicago and announce into my reel-to-reel recorder. And this is all I ever wanted to do. And the luckiest thing that ever happened to me in my career was to come to St. Louis and to come to KSDK TV. I got to work alongside people like Dick Ford and Karen Foss, who became family to me. I knew early on that as a sportscaster, if I was going to make any headway, I needed to have a Sunday night sports show. So our general manager at the time was Bill Bolster, and I tried to convince him that we needed to do a Sunday night sports show. And he says, why would we need to do a Sunday night sports show? We're running The Love Connection, and it's #1 in the ratings. But he caved in, and he gave me 7 minutes at the end of the show, and it did pretty well in the ratings, and eventually it became an hour, and it was the most fun I've ever had in broadcasting doing that show. And what made it great were the people I got to work with. When I got to Channel 5, we had an intern named Andy Moeller, who's sitting right there. And Andy knew more about sports than anybody I had ever met. He was like a Bob Costas encyclopedia guy. And I was able to hire him as a producer. And then I knew the best way to be successful in this business was to surround yourself with good people. So I was able to hire Frank Cusimano out of Lexington, Kentucky, and Trey Wingo, who eventually went on to ESPN, and Matt Weiner, who eventually went on to ESPN. Again, they made me look good, and I just knew you surround yourself with good people. Speaking of luck, who else gets to do the Rams play-by-play for 1 year and they win the Super Bowl? I mean, come on. And when my fortunes changed and they asked me to move from sports to news, my luck continued. I got to work alongside Kay Quinn and Kelly Jackson and Ann Allred. And every night I sit down and I tell the viewers what's going on in our community, and I'm much better at my job because I get to sit next to them. I was also blessed somewhere along the way to MC a small dinner downtown that honored sportsmanship. And thanks to my partnership with Mark Schreiber and Frank Viverito, we turned that annual sportsmanship show into the Musial Awards, which is now broadcast on network TV, and it is a passion. Another great stroke of luck, in 1986, I was asked to do the muscular dystrophy telethon in St. Louis, and we did 19 and a half hours at Crestwood Mall. People remember Crestwood Mall? We did that for years, and they stopped doing a national telethon about 4 or 5 years ago, and the families in town asked me to continue it, so we're still doing the MDA telethon, and again, it's another labor of love for me. And then I've had the best colleagues anybody could ask for. Every day, the crews, the assignment editors, the producers, and especially people like Andrea Firestone and Sonia Potter and Susie Herman and photographers that I've worked for, so many I can't even name, but especially Scott Sapelsa, Eric Voss, and Tom Stasiak, who somehow make my scripts, which are okay, be 100% better because they're so good at their job. But my greatest stroke of luck had nothing to do with my career. It was meeting a young woman who took a job at the same TV station as me in New Orleans. Even though she wasn't from there and I wasn't from there, we were two fish out of water. And The truth is, my wife Claudia is really the Hall of Famer in our family. While I was chasing stories and building a career and she was attending every parent-teacher conference, driving to soccer and basketball and hockey practice, sacrificing her own career to raise our family. And we have 4 amazing kids, 2 amazing daughters-in-law, 3, soon to be 4, grandchildren, and they remind me daily of what truly matters in life. So the truth is, she deserves this recognition way more than I do. So I accept this honor tonight. I can't tell you how lucky I feel just to be on this list, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, let's have one more round of applause for all of tonight's inductees. Thank you for coming tonight. It's been a special joy for me to help out tonight as your MC, and I've been asked to let you know that beverages will continue to be served until 10 p.m. Please enjoy mingling and congratulating our new Hall of Fame members. Have a safe trip home.